The HX Collective explores the human experience through three main channels of life: work, relationships, and self. With raw, authentic conversations, the podcast investigates how challenges can become powerful teachers, leading to personal growth and deeper connections. Rooted in humanity-centered design, each episode reflects a commitment to doing good and doing well, featuring diverse voices and generational perspectives. Expect gripping stories of struggle and success, with thought-provoking discussions and concrete tools and tactics that encourage you to rethink your relationship with distress, helping you to establish your full human experience. This is the HX Collective channel. Welcome to the next episode of the HX Collective podcast, where my guest and I come together in our united missions to elevate human flourishing. Friends, today is a really special day. At time of recording, we are on the eve of Mother's Day of 2026. And today is going to bring a combination of conversations with my guest, Sean Metherell. He is someone that I know professionally as being in a category of one as an eminent domain lawyer. And I'm going to have him tell you what exactly that is if you're not familiar with the subject area. I know him to be a fantastic husband, a father, and a son. And today we're going to hear stories about Sean's and my mother as we engage a conversation about grieving, about hoping, and about human flourishing. So with that, Sean, thank you so much for being with me today. Before we dig into our Mother's Day tribute, I would very much love for you to share some additional context and background for how we even got to this conversation. So start wherever you may, and then we'll dig in.
Deb, first of all, thank you so much. It's such a privilege to join you and to have this conversation and to talk about a topic that I know matters so much to both of us personally. And what I loved about how we kind of landed in this conversation is it was totally by accident. We were talking professionally and it just popped up. And I loved that we both ran with it. And I think it felt like that was the way that it was supposed to be. So I'm just so touched by the opportunity to talk about this with you today.
I want to encourage our listeners, like if you can hold space, you may be amazed at the whole person that's in front of you that you may know in one small context. And just by the listening of a comment or a reflection, if you dig just a little bit deeper, you can find these magical moments. So I just want to underscore how special it was, Sean, that we had the opportunity to come to this part of our lives in our conversation. So with that, continue to share a bit more about your background.
Yeah, well, before I do that, I just wanted to say one other thing to just amplify. What I was reflecting on that I thought was really powerful about that exchange is I felt this kind of impulse to share a little bit with you. We'd never talked about anything personal, but I just had this kind of feeling like, I want to tell Deb about what I've been working on in my personal life, the things that I've been writing about, the things that I've been thinking about. And then it took you as well responding. So it actually was a mutual exchange. And I think that's really the takeaway for me is when you have those opportunities to hold space, it becomes a self-reinforcing loop. And I think that's really special.
I think when we first met, it was through the context of your professional life. And to give people some context, because I think when we talk about the personal mission that you're engaging and nurturing right now, there's a bit of juxtapositioning because your full-time day gig is being a partner at a law firm. Can you talk a little bit about your work as a lawyer? And again, I think this will provide some interesting context for how our conversation will unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We've gotten to know each other through your time working with our firm, and we are so lucky to be able to work with you. So I'm a partner at Faegre Drinker. And I'll just say, Deb is one of the most popular people in our firm. If you talk to partners, and it's true, I know she's not gonna, Deb, you're not gonna want to take that, but it's true. And it's because of the difference that you make for how we practice, and it really does matter. So I'm an eminent domain lawyer. I'm a partner in the real estate litigation practice. And as you alluded to, what is eminent domain? Well, just to kind of boil it down a little bit, it's the interplay between constitutional property rights and kind of notions of fundamental fairness. And it's why I love what I do. I really feel honored to be able to work in this space because public projects, they matter. We need public projects. We need new highways. We need new parks. We need new public infrastructure. But on the other side of that equation, we have to make sure that anything that's done for the public is done fairly. And that's what we do. So I love what I do. I love problem solving, the way that my mind works, the reason that I went to law school. I'm just so drawn to critical thinking. I can chew on problems all day long. Even my hobbies are problem solving hobbies like chess, and I love playing Wordle every day. So that's how I'm wired. But the reason that I particularly love what I do is who I get to work with. I love the clients that I work with. And then at the firm, I love the people that I work with. And I think most notably, I couldn't say anything about my time at the firm without mentioning my partner and mentor and friend, Jack Sperber, who's been, one of the greatest influences on me professionally. He's a gentleman. He's also one of the finest eminent domain lawyers in the country. So it really makes a huge difference in my lived experience as an attorney.
I love that. I'm so glad you mentioned Jack. Shout out to Jack.
Uh,
Gentleman is such a perfect descriptor for him. I can see the evidence of his mentoring and coaching in you, Sean. It's so obvious. And when you're not busy practicing eminent domain law, tell us a little bit about your family and a bit about your passions and hobbies.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I absolutely will start with my family. So I'm husband to a beautiful wife. My wife is one of the most avid book lovers that I know, which I love. She puts me to shame with how much she reads, and it's wonderful. So we have books throughout our entire house. They become kind of our form of decoration. But apart from that, she's truly one of the kindest people that I know. And I think when you see that kindness start to translate to parenting, because we also have a daughter, I'm father to an almost 10-year-old daughter, Madison. And it really matters, that kindness, that kind of spirit, it really matters a lot. So our home is, we try to be really intentional. Every home has challenges, you go through difficult things in life. Nobody's perfect, but we really try to lean into love and kindness with how we treat each other. And I love that about us. Apart from being a husband and a dad, my passions are cycling. I spend a lot of time on the bike. And then I spend a lot of time thinking about, I like philosophy. I like nonfiction. My wife reads a lot of fiction. I do a lot of the nonfiction. I like to think about things a lot. So I spend a lot of time. And then I couldn't, forget to mention how important friendships are to me. And I want to circle back to that a little bit later.
When I think about the sharing with me about some of the passion projects that you've been engaging and really stepping into what I would call a shared mission that we have, can you tell me how the intersection of human flourishing really comes into your mission and your passion and work and with your family?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, and it's actually a question that I was reflecting on. How did I really start thinking about human flourishing? And honestly, I'd say it really catalyzed after losing my mom. So my mom passed in January of 2025. And I feel like that moment kind of reawakened a piece of me that had been maybe lying dormant. So, no surprise, the practice of law at a big firm can be all encompassing. And I think when you add to that, the challenges, my mom was quite sick for a number of years before she passed, and we didn't know what it was. It was really challenging. And I felt like kind of the release of that and being able to make peace with that actually gave me space and time to pause and reflect. And in that space, that question of human flourishing started to kind of take root without even really knowing that that's what I was going after. I've spent a lot of time reading philosophy that I'd read for the first time and only time back in college, and kind of reacquainting with a lot of those ideas. And so this question has become a very practical question. How do I make my way forward from this difficult moment? What can I do now? Next, how can I grow from this? And then part of the reason I've started writing and sharing some of these ideas, how can I help others who may be going through moments like that? And that's become a real part of my passion, is that, I feel like I have an opportunity to share a little bit what I've learned.
When it became so clear, we both had lost our moms really very recently, and I would say our moms were really young to
Mhm.
pass. I just felt like there was so much more life. My mom, Pam, she passed in November of 2024, and
Mm,
it's like becoming a member of a club that you
yes.
didn't know what it would feel like to be in. You think when you are with people who lose a parent, and until you have that lived experience, it there's no way to describe just the enormity of loss in that sense, particularly I think with mothers. And I'd love for you to share a bit about your mom, what I can see about her and what I'm seeing in evidence of your writing and just in knowing who you are. I can only imagine how much life and light she had throughout the time she was on this earth. But tell us a little bit about her.
Yeah, well, this is such a treat to be able to talk about her and to honor her. My mom was truly one of those just through and through kind people. She had a caregiver spirit. It's no surprise that she ultimately became a nurse, but I'd say long before she was a nurse professionally, I think she embodied that caregiver spirit. She was always someone who was first to raise her hand to help if people needed help. She had friends who were 30 and 40 years older than her who would call her every week. There were so many people who thought of my mom as their very best friend because she treated them like a very best friend would treat you. And I think what I've reflected on with my mom that I find so amazing and inspiring is that she didn't reserve the best parts of herself only for one or two people. She just gave freely. And I think that piece, as I've started to really understand and think about some of the philosophy that I've been coming back to, I realized that my mom, who was not into reading the sorts of things that I read, I'd try to talk to her about it, and it was not her flavor, but she lived it. And I think that is really profound to me. And when I look back at the example that she set, that's what stands out the most. My mom was also a single mom for a lot of, my childhood. And I'm the oldest of four. She never complained. She worked hard, sometimes worked two jobs while putting herself through nursing school. And so as a father of one, I look back at my mom now with the perspective of a parent, a working parent, and I go, I don't know how you did it. Like, I'm amazed. And I think the admiration that I have for my mom in navigating challenging circumstances, never complaining, and doing so with that kind of loving spirit that really stands out. And I think the core of that for her is she had a very deep faith that was foundational to how she lived. That was foundational to how she treated people. And she had wonderful parents who gave that to her and who were the same way, kind of salt of the earth people from, Missouri, living on farmland in Missouri. And that was really how they were, simple but kind and loving to everyone.
I know that if I would meet your mom, I loved how you're describing that so many people saw her as someone that they would count as a best friend, and our moms were such kindred spirits.
Hmm.
My mom's mantra, we'll start here. My mom's mantra in life was, "It's not done till it's overdone." I was raised in Texas, and while my mom was not originally from Texas, she sort of embodied a Texas mom spirit. I mean, this was a woman who just to simply go to the grocery store, she would have to put her face on. And I remember growing up just thinking she was the most beautiful, most
Mhm.
bright, like she just walked around with a light around her. And she had this uncanny ability to make every person in the room feel like they were the only person in the room. And she
Yes.
would do that. I would watch her with, how she would treat a grocery store clerk, or how she would speak to someone at a restaurant, or how she would address someone of prominence in our community, or an elected official, or a neighbor, or my best friends, all throughout our childhood. She just had this way of validating you and making you feel that you were special just because you existed. It wasn't a performative kind of presence for her, but rather just like an intensity around love. Unlike your mom, though, my mom did not come from a very stable or
Mm,
loving or nurturing background. Her parents were very volatile,
mm,
both had struggles with alcohol,
mm,
and my mom, from a really young age, really tried to cope with the traumas and the challenges of her youth by being a really, really high performing person. She would always try to achieve and excel in her work and in her school. And as a result of a lot of choices along the way, she ended up often moving in the direction of trying to make herself feel stable and complete by finding the right guy or the right man. So my mom had a few marriages along the way, and my sister and I are born out of two of those marriages. And notwithstanding some of that struggle and some of the upheaval, my sister and I reflected that the one thing in our mother's entire life, there was not a single day that she and I could remember we didn't feel loved.
Mm.
And it's interesting to see how so much of the patterns of my mom's childhood and her experiences as an adult, how she was really able to break so many of those cycles and really encouraging my sister and me to take the best of who she was, but also to learn from her experiences. She was always really open and very vulnerable about her mistakes. She was really great at taking accountability and responsibility, and she was always wanting and encouraging us to be our best. And it sounds like some of the same spirit was there, maybe the origin a little bit different, but I can only imagine how your mom must have had to move, and being a single parent to boot with four kids. I can't even imagine how she must have made that look so easy and effortless, notwithstanding we both know that that would have been an enormous amount to carry. Do you recall any sort of things about your mom, as you look at how she would move with you in the home, or the way she would communicate with you? You said you're the oldest of your
Hmm.
siblings. Are there things that stand out when you think about your own parenting style, or things that she may have instilled in you that seem alive today?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, I can't help but remark that we actually have so much more in common than I even realized. And what a wonderful opportunity to learn. My mom also had, several marriages, and, my siblings and I are from two of those. And I think what my mom always said is she was always just trying to do the best for us, and she was trying to provide the best life for us that she could. And I think that stands out to me the most, is that my mom had a selflessness to her. I think it's very difficult when life doesn't go well. I think it's difficult to not kind of retreat inward and make it about you. I'm trying to solve my problem. And lots of people don't have the wherewithal to kind of look beyond themselves. And so I really admire her ability to retain this focus on us and to make it about her children, and to make sure that we always felt cared for. And I can't help but remark about something you said, that you and your sister concluded. You never doubted the love. And my siblings and I have talked about this over and over, since my mom passed, just reminding ourselves that's the piece that stands out the most, is just an ever present notion of love. And also, we would say, I love you all the time. So that's a practice in our household. We probably say, I love you, my daughter and wife, I mean, 20 times a day. And that was my mom. And it's not just saying it, but then showing it, and showing it by always wanting to help and participate and be present, even if it meant that she wasn't sleeping as much as she probably needed because she was working. So yeah, I think as an adult now, I look back at that and I just marvel at that kind of quality. And as I've reminded my siblings, what an opportunity that we each have to actually honor her legacy by living that same way. And I've told my brothers and my sister, what better thing for us to do than for people to just know by looking at how we treat others, oh, those are Sandy's children.
I love when people say you're so much like your mom Pam, or
Yes.
when they refer to my mom's name was Pam, and it just it my in fact one of my favorite anecdotes, recognizing it's going to be Mother's Day, but
Mm.
my mom, as I said, was a little larger than life, and it was always fun for Mother's Day with her because she had taken on her grandmother moniker. And Sean, when I tell you, she was running through whether she was going to be a grandma or a nana, and she settled upon Grammy. And when she decided her name was going to be Grammy Pam, she's like, "Now, Debbie, I'm going to be Grammy Pam. And I mean Grammy like the award." It
That's
would be so
amazing.
funny. So Mother's Day was often Grammy
Love it.
Pam Mother Day, Grammy's Day, as well. And so when she passed, it really it created such a big hole. And,
Mm,
and as we're approaching the day of celebration tomorrow, as a mother myself, I have 3 daughters, and we are really looking forward to remembering the things that Grammy taught us and my mom
mm,
taught us, and having a chance to really celebrate her in the life that she continues to impart to us. But I have to say, I'm sure milestones are most difficult. I know you've just passed the 1 year anniversary, and
yeah,
the birthdays, the sort of special days and celebrations, those seem to hit the hardest. And this experience of grieving, I've certainly had loss of people in my lives, but never this like grieving experience to lose my mother. And I, you know, I think that, grieving clearly, I've certainly read enough. I've engaged my mental health and well-being all throughout my life. And grieving was something that I knew was a space, but man, it goes deep when you lose a parent, and in particular losing your moms. And I'm curious to know, Sean, knowing that you passed the 1 year anniversary, and again, coming upon this Mother's Day, what do you know about grieving now that you've had this period of time? And, I'd love to hear about your experiences and maybe some of the things that have surprised you.
yeah. Well, first of all, you're right. The milestones are challenging. I think first, before I get into some of the grief, I think one of the things that I've had to remind myself of is that it's okay to grieve. It's okay for grief not to be a linear process. It's okay for grief not to be something that you feel like you kind of go through and then you're done with. I think the first thing that I've noticed about grief is that it's the opposite of that. It can kind of catch you without warning. And one of the things that you and I shared is that kind of impulse, that wish that you could pick up your phone and send a text, or pick up the phone and call. And my mom and I talked on the phone all the time, multiple times a week, even if it was just a few minutes, just to say I love you and just to catch up. Every single time that I was sick, I would call my mom, no matter what. And so those kinds of moments, and I see it with my wife and my daughter, there is just this special relationship between mothers and children that is so sacred and special. I think the grief process for me, my mom, we thought she had Parkinson's for 4 years. She was diagnosed with that initially. And then, it turned out that she didn't have it. It was something that was very rare, called multiple system atrophy. And it looks like Parkinson's until it doesn't. And what distinguishes it is that it's not treatable, it's very painful, and it shortens your lifespan significantly. So my mom, it was about 5 years in total. So the process of grief for us as a family was a very stretched out process, because you see this person. My mom was beautiful and radiant and, this tall, she took great care of herself. She was like 5'9", and just this vitality to her. And to see somebody go from that to not being able to really walk as well, and then not really being able to walk at all, not being able to hold, her grandchildren who were such a treasured part of her life, not really being able to speak without getting fatigued. And so the grief was this kind of stretched out process of seeing somebody go bit by bit by bit, and then all at once. But that process actually, it was challenging for all of us, and I think each of us handled that differently. I tend to go up here. I'm a very analytical person, so I thought a lot about this. And one of the things that, landed for me is that grief that feels so enormous, and this is not an original thought, but it really made sense to me in a way that I didn't understand before experiencing it. Grief that is so enormous is actually a reflection of how great the love was on the other side of it. And I wrote that the day after my mom passed. I shared a tribute about her. And that's one of the things that I said, is that, where our grief is great, it means that our love was great too. And so now when I feel those moments of grief, I now try to greet them as an opportunity to reflect on the love. And so if I feel that pang of grief, I go, oh, this is a good opportunity to really reflect with gratitude on how much I was loved, and how much I loved my mom, and how much she loved others, and to take that and not let it sink me, but let it propel me.
Well, thank you. I love doing these conversations on this podcast because I get so many nuggets and blessings from my guests. And that is such a powerful takeaway for me when I feel that experience of grief, that's the wake up notice, if you
Mhm.
will, to reflect on, then the depth of that love was real, and to have that experience of gratitude, and to sort of welcome that opportunity to pause and reflect and remember. I thank you for that, and I hope that others that are listening, if you've lost a loved one or a parent or your mother, that what you're saying, Sean, it rings so true for me, that the weight of how hard something is to experience in grieving is proportionate to the depth of how valuable the relationship or the experience is. I'm also so glad you said it's not a linear process. Many people had suggested that that would be, a bit more like a roller coaster
Mhm.
or a winding road, and there wasn't a destination to quote get over it. And I found that to be very freeing, because it has been a roller coaster, and I'm curious to know, as you've been on the ride, and as you've come through the experiences, what are some of the things that, had surprised you most about your processing?
I think one of the biggest takeaways with the process of grief is actually what brought us together in this conversation, Deb, which is that it is a shared human experience. And that was part of the tribute that I shared. If you are lucky enough to live a long life, it is guaranteed that you will experience loss. And you could fight it, or you could embrace it and know that this has always been part of the human experience. And I think the piece that comes alongside that is the kind of opportunity for empathy, the opportunity for deeper human connections, the opportunity for greater poignancy in life. And I think the piece for me that has felt so catalyzing, that I know my mom would be very proud of, is that it has reawakened. I alluded to this earlier. It's reawakened this part of me. I've started reading and thinking about ideas that I had put on the shelf, thinking, oh, I checked that box long ago. I read that before. I don't need to read that again. But it's actually brought me back to kind of first principles, if you will. Like, what am I about? What am I for? And how can I share that with others? How can I learn from others who have gone through grief? And the piece that has been amazing is how many of my friends have made it, I don't think with any kind of intention, a regular part of their practice to share their experience with grief, because we're all in the club. And, I'm fortunate. My mom lived to be, in her early 60s. I have friends who lost their parents when they were in their 40s. And I know people who have lost children. And so that kind of grief, that kind of heartbreak, it is not something that you can plan for. But when it happens, I think it can wreck you and then it can rebuild you. And I think the surest way to be rebuilt is to allow yourself to open up a little bit more and to connect with others, because I really do believe in my bones we are stronger together as people.
It's a great thread to pick up on. It You've been alluding to some writing and sort of expressing yourself. And I want to say, for our audience's benefit, Sean has the most awesome Substack. And we're going to talk a bit about some of the things that I've read about what you've written, Sean, and it just changing paradigm and perspective on the subject of not only grieving but hope. But there was one area in particular. I should also say, I think I said we're going to include the it's Substack and access to your Instagram videos. Make sure that we include that in the show notes. But there's this profound sense that I had when I read your first piece, Hope is Discipline, and you reflect on really almost like this paradox of, how does grieving and human flourishing, or how does grieving and hoping, how those things come together. And in particular, you quoted F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about your experience in the paradox of grieving and hoping, and how these things come together.
Yeah, well, Fitzgerald's one of my favorite writers, and there are a couple of his couple of his quotes that have become part of my life and that have taken on different life as I've gone along. I remember reading these quotes, and I'll reference them in a minute, but for the first time in college, and I remember going, wow, those are really interesting. I like those ideas. And it's amazing how they've matured as I've matured in life. And this one in particular that I reference in that piece that I wrote, Hope is Discipline, is one that I felt so deeply in the space of navigating grief. Because grief, as I was describing earlier, for me, grief is two things at once. It is feeling sadness about the loss, it is also feeling gratitude for the love. How can you hold two things in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function? That to me was realizing you don't have to have it be an either or thing. You know, you can miss your mom on Mother's Day, and I do. Get a little choked up just thinking about it. But I can also reflect with such profound gratitude on how much love and how fortunate I was to have that love and to bask in the light of that love. And I think that in a broader sense, it started making me think. I do a lot of thinking on the bike, while
Yes.
I'm riding my bike late at night after a long work day. I've really tried to engage in a practice of just sitting with ideas and then just letting my mind wander. Every draft that I've written starts with me talking out
Oh,
loud, and I record my thoughts and then I go back and edit later. But as I thought about this idea about the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind and yet still retain the ability to function. One should both be able to see that things are hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise. It has taken on this profound notion for me that has so many applications. It applies personally with grief. It also applies socially. We can see how much is broken in our society, and yet I think we can remind ourselves, yes, that's true. And what else? Let's be determined to make it otherwise. Let's work together and point towards something better. And that has become really kind of a compass point for me.
it's illuminating that you speak first and then write second because the way you narrate in your writing, it feels like you're talking. And I'm taken by what you're describing. And I found in particular, so the piece Hope is Discipline, that sense of how to navigate the hopefulness in the spirit of feeling hopeless and how it's not the either or. You also wrote a piece called The Discipline of Hoping Together. And that notion again of, that we're not meant to necessarily bear the weight independently or so like a solo sport, that there's a sense of connection or community. Speak a little bit about that as you think about this, even this concept of hope, which I think in some cases, yeah, that may be a bit hard for people to put their hands around, and how you kind of contemplate it, but you do it so beautifully. And so I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share some of the insights that you're holding true now and you're putting out to be in service to others in the way that you are.
I think the insight that I've been pursuing is it can feel isolating to open your eyes. And I'm one of those people, I like to just kind of know little bits about everything. I just constantly taking in information. And one of the things that I observed is that starts to have it takes a toll. There's a cost to that. Like the more that you open yourself up to, if you're a sensitive person, and I'm a sensitive person, it can start to affect you. It can start to make you see how much is broken. And when you're a problem solver by trade, but again, like my mom was a caregiver long before she became a nurse, I've been an analytically minded person my entire life. It's just how I think. So I had that kind of lawyer's disposition long before I became an attorney. I think when you're looking at broader issues and you're seeing problems and then not knowing how to solve them, I think it can be demoralizing. It can be destabilizing to go, I don't know how we get through this. I don't know what the way forward to this is, but I've tried to remind myself that that's one of the blind spots that every generation is going to have. not being able to see what's coming next. I try to reflect a lot on what people in 1600s would have thought about our life right now, what we're doing right now. It would have felt like magic, like witchcraft,
Yeah.
right? They wouldn't have been able to even conceive of things. But that's kind of the cheap stuff. What about the things where there were existential problems, truly? Issues in how they lived on a day-to-day basis. There were existential threats every single day that are now things that we completely take for granted, that we've solved those problems. And I've tried to think to myself, hey, we all are going to have those blind spots. Ours is not to have everything figured out. Ours is to dream the way forward and then keep reminding each other over and over, hey, this is what we're pointing towards. I don't know how we're going to get there, but we should absolutely know where we're trying to go. Because if we know where we're trying to go and we know what we're doing it for, each other, relationally, then I think that is the key. That's the leading indicator. What it looks like at the end, well, we may not know. Just like other generations wouldn't get to see the fruits of what's coming. But I've thought about that sacred opportunity to plant a seed so that future generations will be able to sit under the shade. Future generations will be able to take that fruit. And I think we can enjoy that too. If we live this way, I truly believe the version of you and me 5 years from now, we will benefit from that. So I think there's something really powerful, not just for future generations, but for us as well, the future versions of us.
I love how you're speaking about this because there's such a consciousness and such a almost an empowerment of choosing to shift your focus or your mindset or to reflect on, to learn from history and then be propelled forward and to have that consciousness and prioritization around connection, around relationships, around the concept of hope. And admittedly, and I'm almost I don't always like to speak to things in a way that takes away from the shared experience we have as human beings and by genderizing a conversation. But in particular, I think the things that you're describing, certainly the way that you are reflecting in this awakening in your writing and in your videos, that I'd have to ask what is that from the male vantage point? I mean, I it's I don't know. It's like the male ethos and expressing emotion. There just seems to be these layers of expectation or unwritten rules, and I'm curious how you're. I was going to say confronting that, but maybe more it's like acknowledging that and still stepping into this space of something that is really rooted in the analytical, rooted in the emotion. And I'm curious to know what that experience is like for you.
It is an important topic and an important question, and it is one that I've thought a lot about. I think the root for me, I've realized that I was very much a product of that. I don't know if it's explicit or implicit, probably a combination of both. But this idea that you should hold everything in and that you should just be kind of the strong silent type. And I had a lifetime of doing that, of not really knowing how to express, not feeling safe to express because you worry about what people are going to think. You worry about being perceived as weak if you acknowledge that you've gone through challenges in life. And I think honestly for me, and I would just want to share this anecdote because I think it really informs what was so propulsive for me. My mom, she passed away on a Sunday, and on Friday, that was the last exchange that I had with her where we were able to talk to each other. And my sister and I on Saturday decided, we want to bring, her oldest son, my sister has three amazing boys, and my daughter to say goodbye. And my mom had been completely unresponsive that day. And so I whispered to my mom before my daughter and my nephew came in. I said, "Hey, we're gonna come by and say goodbye." No response, no acknowledgement. And it was amazing. My daughter got there first, and as soon as she walked in the room, and my daughter has just such a sweet little voice, said, "Hi, Grandma." And my mom opened her eyes and looked right at my daughter and immediately said, "I love you so much." And then said it again, "Grandma loves you so much." And it was so powerful for me that my mom was making sure that she saved that energy. And there are a few powerful takeaways. First of all, just to finish the story, I told my daughter later that night how much that meant to me. It's scary to see people in a hospital room like that, especially when you're a little kid. There's noises and all these people, and it can be overwhelming. But I told my daughter, that was such a gift that you gave to every one of us. It was a gift that you gave to grandma, and I hope you know how much she loved you, because I want that to be a moment that my daughter looks back at and recognizes as formative. But for me, it truly was formative. And I've told my daughter this, and I'm going to keep coming back to this because for me, it told me that the thing that matters the most, the stuff that lasts until the very end, all of the identifiers you have to let go of as you're passing away. All the worries that you have, all of the things that matter so much, quote unquote, you leave those behind. But the thing that my mom did not leave behind was love. The thing that she saved all the way through the very end was the way that she connected with people. I've taken that seriously. I've realized that I have a tendency to want to overanalyze everything and to want to philosophize about everything. I've tried to really make a point to live it, to try to live it and be about it. Don't just talk about it, be about it. And so for me as a man, I've realized I don't hear a lot of men expressing themselves. I don't hear a lot of men talking about these ideas because I think we're all afraid of being perceived as weak. I've found the opposite to be true. I've never felt stronger as a man the more that I've opened up. I've never felt more centered as a person the more that I've opened up. I can even get choked up, and that feels strong too. Tears are not weakness. Tears are actually an acknowledgement of how, to me, it's a reminder of how true that thing is for me that I just said. And if I'm getting choked up, it's because I'm going, yeah, this is the good stuff. Double underline that. That's the real stuff.
I think, I hope, if nothing else, I hope that the people who are listening to this podcast can really take to heart what you've said, and that the experience of when you show and express emotion or vulnerability, that that is actually one of the highest expressions of strength. And I'm amazed that in talking about where I'm feeling sad, or if I'm feeling, in a lot of ways, I think I parrot some of that behavior of like always trying to keep it all together and keeping on a brave face and not letting people see the feelings of vulnerability. And yet it's always so true. It's almost as if the permission to be, when you are willing to be authentic and to share that piece of you, the all of you, what it opens up for other people. It's almost like it gives permission for them to access, to be more fully human. I wouldn't have anticipated that, and it's really become very front and center for me, and how I've been able to process my feelings of grief over the loss of my mom. And frankly, now it's carried into other things, like my ability to talk about being sad, adding that emotion to the emotion wheel and being able to express it. And I feel so much more, I don't know, like accessible as a person, and the ability for people to see me and to really know me. I'm curious if that's what you've been seeing, is people come in and encounter maybe your writing, or they see you maybe in the professional context, and then they get a chance to taste a little bit of what you're doing now and the way you're expressing yourself. How's that occurred for you, or how's that affected you, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that has been like the easiest reinforcer of keep doing this. I'm not I'm not sharing my writing. I'm not sharing any of the videos because I'm trying to, go viral or trying to get an audience. There are people that are doing that and I commend them for it. I am very happy with my job as an attorney. I like what I do. I think the things that have been so reinforcing is that I've had so many people, men and women, but again, especially for this conversation, men reach out to me and say, privately, thank you for expressing things that I didn't know how to express. You were putting into words something that I've been feeling, but I didn't really know how to articulate. And it could be, some of the things that I've written about, religious ideas and, philosophical ideas. It could be things about hope, be things about grief. I think this is not universally true, but I think it is categorically true that there are a lot of men who don't know how to get things out. I have so many friends who don't know how to get things out. I was that person who didn't know how to get things out. So I don't say any of this from like on high. I've got it all figured out. I'm still very much a work in progress. But I think the way through is to do it. The way through is to be about it. Don't just talk about it. And again, I think the good things in life, when you do them, they lead to more good things. Good begets more good. And I think we are at our strongest as men when we can acknowledge the things that we're dealing with. Because there's a great lie there to that compartmentalization that if I keep it tucked away, nobody will notice. No, they do. It always will pop up. It will just pop up in ways you don't intend it to. And so it's actually, I think, for me, I look back at that as a weakness of how many years of my life I spent not dealing with things. And the act of opening up and integrating, I felt like I'm becoming the truest version of me that I've ever been. And that feels like that's a process. I liken this to kind of philosophical and spiritual hygiene. It's something that you need to do over and over and over. It's not a box to be checked. It's a way to practice. It's a way to live. It's a way to be. And it's going to be imperfect. I There will be days that will go by where I haven't done this. I'm like, why am I feeling kind of stuck and unmoored? And I now look at that as a little bit of an alarm clock of, hey, how long has it been since you kind of came back to center? Are there things that you're struggling with that you haven't opened up or expressed, even just to yourself? Well, maybe try that. And it's amazing how as soon as I do that, I go, oh yeah, there it is. And it feels like the clouds have parted. And I think the more that I talk with people about the fact that I'm doing this, these aren't unique ideas to me, but you're humanizing it. These aren't philosophical ideas on a shelf. This is a real person who's living this, who's doing this with real problems and real challenges in life. But I think this is a way to navigate through difficult things in life.
Beautiful. And what a great, again, so much wisdom. It is good begets good, isn't it? It's like the self reinforcing feedback loop. And it is almost that immediacy of trigger that when we're stuck or disconnected, that instead of white knuckling through that pause and recenter and then expressing, it opens things up in a way that creates almost like a refresh in a way that, we can everything renders then and it kind of refreshes and kind of comes present. Well, I know that this conversation and so many more will be great, and I am so excited to continue to follow all that you're experiencing and the gifts that you're giving to me and to an audience to not only hear and learn more about you, but it is the gift of that, how it makes me reflect more and grow more. And I can see the qualities of your mom, the through lines in you already. And as we wrap for today's conversation, I would love to know if there's any traits that you are embodying that you think this is me, this is Sandy incarnate in Sean. What are some of the things that you hold and are expressing that are real tributes to your mother?
Well, it wouldn't be me if I didn't bring a little bit more philosophy in just at the end here. I've been rereading Aristotle, and he talks about in his Nicomachean Ethics what is the key to eudaimonia, which is a flourishing life. And one of the things that is essential to a flourishing life is friendship. And I can't help but come back to my mom's practice of really investing in friendship, investing in relationships, whether it's, with her family. And under Aristotle's framing, you can be friends with your family. You can be friends with your spouse. You should be friends with your family and your spouse. And I have found that really being intentional about investing in relationships has been a huge component of flourishing, a huge component of navigating difficulties. I have appointments every week to talk with certain friends. I have a friend who is, you know, about 20 years older, and we talk every single week and we get into the really real stuff. And it has become such a huge part of me. And I think that's the thing that I see that I go, Oh, yeah, she was actually living that kind of eudaimonia, that flourishing life, because friendship was essential to her. Relationship was essential to her. That's why it was easy for her to save that best part of herself for my daughter at the end, because that was what she invested in. And so that to me is the thing that I'm continuing to lean into is you can give that best self anybody that you interact with, because I think this practice of love in a grand sense, love that is kind to everyone, love that is patient to everyone, love that forgives when forgiveness is needed, love that is humble, love that seeks reconciliation when that's needed, love that acknowledges faults, and then just continuing to do that day after day in every single interaction that you have. It demystifies that. And when you stack all of those little moments up, I think then you can look back at the day and go, yeah, that was a good day. And then those days start to add up. And then that becomes a good week, a good month, and to me, a good life. And I think that's what Aristotle, that's what Marcus Aurelius, these philosophers, that's the question they were trying to solve. On a practical level, how do we live well? My mom modeled that without ever reading anything in that space. So, what a gift to be able to reflect on her and go, thank you, mom, for modeling to me the way to live well. What a treasure. And I love you.
Sean, I same the things that you are describing. I am very hopeful in what happens after we pass, and I know that right now Sandy and Pam
Yes.
have probably found each other because it's such a beautiful tribute to be that person who can continue to reflect and the power of that intention. And I have to say, you know, I started by saying my mom's mantra was it's not done till it's overdone. And I think the thing that I'm taking away from this conversation and when I'm know that I'll continue to carry forward is that I can never overdo love.
Mm.
And so in the greatest sense, the power of presence, the power of being very intentional with people who matter, your friendship in the truest sense in every capacity. Those are the things that Sandy and Pam embodied. And I'm so
Yes.
grateful that we have this connection and friendship. As we wrap for this conversation today, there's so many nuggets that I know our audience is taking away. Are there any final words of encouragement or any key takeaways that we haven't shared that we would want our audience to know, and that based on this conversation for them to feel a bit more human and a bit more flourishing in that experience of being human?
One of the things that I've suggested to folks sometimes on these like Instagram reels is if you do anything, if anything that I'm talking about kind of connects for you, talk with somebody else in your life about it. Practice opening up a little bit more. I've thought about why pyramid schemes fail. Pyramid schemes fail because it's a model that doesn't work. You run out of people. That's what exponential math in a model of extraction will do. You'll run out of people and the math doesn't work and the economics don't work. But hope and love and the practice of opening up to others, while doing that one person at a time and encouraging others to do that and on and on and on, that kind of exponential growth, it really does work. And that kind of exponential growth can actually change not just people, but communities. And I think, not to get too grandiose, but I think that is how the world has always been changed, is one person at a time. And I think reminding ourselves, what are we about? What are our values? What do we want to invest in? What do we want to dream for in the future? Who are we trying to be? What will we be proud of in the future? And I like to think about those as gifts that I give to myself, as gifts that I give to those around me. But it starts one person at a time. And in that way, it's the easiest thing to do, one person at a time. And if you've never done it, the only moment that you ever have is the present. That's all we have. So start.
True. Sean, thank you. Happiest of memories for Mother's Day for you and for me
Yes.
tomorrow, and to your beautiful wife and siblings. I can't wait for our next conversation. And for those listening, thank you for being with us today. And until next time, we wish you well and continuing to grow and experience the best parts of being human, which is what we got today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deb. What a gift.
Thanks for being here. If today's conversation sparked something in you, we hope you'll carry it forward with curiosity, compassion, and courage. Subscribe to the show, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs it. Until next time, keep exploring what it means to be fully human.